Good morning, this is Reid Seals for WGRV. I'm here with Greene County Mayor Kevin Morrison for our monthly interview, and this is actually his first interview. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Reid.
First question, how has your first month in office gone, and was it as you expected?
Yes and no. My first month in office has been sort of quite the whirlwind. I tell people all the time it's a little bit like playing checkers in a hurricane. So you're trying to concentrate and get things done, and you sort of have an order or a plan or a strategy for getting those things done, but sometimes unexpected things sort of come out of the blue, and you don't necessarily have a plan to handle those, so you just take those as they come. So.
And what is your opinion on the Clerk Master case, and where does it go from here since the commission has approved appealing?
Okay. Very good question. The Clerk Master case was a case I inherited, of course, from the previous county commission and the county mayor. The Clerk Master suit is one of those very difficult things in the fact that the clerk obviously sees that or has a grievance with regard to the funding for her office and staffing. So therefore, her constitutional remedy is to sue. And then it's up to the county commission as the legislative funding body to either decide whether they're going to acquiesce and fund the office as requested, or they're going to fight the case. Now, the previous county commission obviously determined that they were going to fight the case, that the requests were not merited, and decided to go to court. Now, anytime I think that we sort of, negotiations break down, if you will, that some things can be brought up that's not necessarily good, or I don't know that polite's the word, but certainly, dirty laundry that you don't necessarily like to air for both sides. And that's been the case with this case, obviously. Hindsight's 20/20. You can look back and say, well, if we had done a little bit more tougher negotiations and everybody would have been willing to sort of bend or give a little bit, then we might have a different outcome. But it is what it is. The case is under appeal. The previous county commission actually decided that they would appeal the case before the final ruling of the chancellor that heard the case in Washington County. Of course, our chancellor here recused himself because of the closeness, obviously, with it being his office. And then the Judge John Rambo in Washington County was the one that heard the case and essentially pointed out a very long litany of things that were not done, that some weren't done properly, some rather sloppily, but did rule in favor of the Clerk and Master, Miss Armstrong, to the tune of about a half of a person is, or a half of an employee, essentially, in addition to her office. Now, that being said, the commission decided that they would appeal, and then that case is pending appeal. What everybody's waiting on, essentially, is the final ruling of the chancellor that heard the case, and that's essentially the payment of the lawyer fees. What are the lawyers going to be awarded in terms of the bills that they've turned in? Now, they can be awarded the full prescription that they've applied for, some portion of that, or nothing. I mean, the judge, that's up to him to decide. That appeal was sustained at our meeting the other night, based on information that come from our lawyer, Miss Suzanne Cook, out of Johnson City. She was told initially from the first lawsuit that to aggressively pursue the appeal, and she has, and done an excellent job. With the passage of the budget, August the 20th, that requires all of the department heads to sign a salary agreement or a funding agreement, basically saying that they agree to the budget that was passed by the legislative body. And everyone signed that funding agreement except Miss Armstrong. And obviously she was looking for funding that that Judge Rambo had set in the initial lawsuit. That was not forthcoming. Once again, the legislative body decided, and we will comply with the court's order going forward when that final ruling is given. However, her budget was set at the previous year's level, and for that she was not satisfied. And essentially the law says she has 30 days to object to that, and she did, and that's the filing of the second lawsuit. Now, the second lawsuit could go away pending the outcome, I guess, of the first lawsuit or the appeal. But that's where we stand. Again, it's sort of unfortunate that we're at this location. As the county mayor, I have very limited ability in accordance with the law and precedents established by previous salary suits to negotiate directly with the clerk and master in this case. But because the county commission is the funding body and pretty much all precedents say that they're the ones that call the shots. So sometimes I feel like a man on an island. I'm sure David Crum felt that way in the fact that you're just sort of along for the ride. So wherever the roller coaster takes us, we sort of have to go with it. So,
how did you go about choosing what commissioner goes on which board or committee?
Well, one of the things that I did early on, Reed, was I had an orientation, sort of onboarding meeting that was actually a good thing. I brought in our HR director, our attorney, the established parliamentarian from the commission, the trustee, the payroll clerk, and different things to essentially sort of give the commissioners as much orientation and onboarding information that I could, because, I mean, in today's sort of governmental environment, there's a lot of rules and policies now that have been established with regard to HR and governance that we got to go by, that the lay public, or when you're out there campaigning, for an initial county commission seat, that you're absolutely not aware of. But I had them turn in their wishes and requests, and then I had a one-on-one sort of meet and greet type meetings to sort of determine where their strengths and weaknesses lie with regard to the committees that were available, and to see if, for instance, their request matched up to those positions or appointments. Most of them did. We were able to match the commissioners' strengths and apply them to the committees that we have available. And for the most part, everybody got some of their top requests. That wasn't always the case. Some came to me and said they wanted to be on a very limited number of committees. Others came and said, put me where you think that I best would fit. So that's sort of how we selected those committees. We spread those requests out all over the conference table and plugged them in one at a time. I tried to actually also include some continuity from the old commission, not just sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater and sort of start anew. Some people had advised sort of starting anew. Some had advised sort of leaving everything the way it was, but I wanted to come in and put my flavor on it, if you will, match some of the new commissioners' strengths with some of the committees, and that's how we done it.
Are there any certain capital projects that you have in mind that you would like to get done?
Well, some things that we've had some unexpected capital projects that we have to get done. The first thing that comes to mind is the elevator in the jail itself. It's 31 years old. It actually has somewhat, as I would describe, a hydraulic piston that pushes the elevator car from underneath, and that has over time allowed water into the system that's actually below the ground quite a bit, and so it's gone out of service, and we've already had some legal issues that have arisen over having now to bring prisoners out of the jail and up the stairs into the various courtrooms as we have legal proceedings. But the commission, in an emergency session or in a suspended rules session, decided that that was certainly worth fixing. It's just a very expensive fix. So that's a capital project that we didn't necessarily have on the radar screen. We've got a roof replacement over at the election office, as well as a handicapped restroom, and then some awnings to be done around the courthouse annex to make it more safe for the cold weather coming. Some of maybe the long range capital projects that we would be looking at is to have a larger, sort of more well organized solid waste convenience center at South Greene. That's a very narrow, compact space out there that serves a very large community, a very important community. So we're going to look at various ways that perhaps we can install some compactors there, make that a little bit more convenient, obviously, make it a little bit more efficient, because right now we're pretty much doing garbage runs out there almost every day. So,
what do you think the county schools should do in the face of declining enrollment and less state funding, since the consolidated school funding did not pass?
Well, I've always maintained, number one, I personally support our smaller community-based schools. I've got 4 children. They've all, one of them has since moved on to college. They've all have attended county schools, and in my view, received a very good education. Our educators, our school system is doing an excellent job. And I think that's bolstered by the fact that the grade cards that we've gotten most recently, particularly with the one that was published in the Greeneville Sun most recently, with the 5-star ratings that were given to a good number of the schools in the county, some of which my kids attend, so I'm very proud of that. The difficult part is that over the course of the last 10 years, and this has been well publicized, is that because of the loss of enrollment, the amount of money that the state sends back to Greene County has precipitously dropped. And the dilemma that the school system faces, that the school board faces, and it's very obvious to those that keep up with it, is that we're maintaining the same number of buildings, we're employing the same number of employees, we're running the same number of buses, but with about $700,000 less every year, year over year, and that can't continue. So we've got to figure out, number one, why and where our students are leaving our school system. For instance, are they leaving, going to the city for the visibility of athletics, for the academics? Are they being homeschooled? Are they going to different systems? I personally feel that a big portion of this, obviously, is the economy. Of course, our economy now in Greene County is improving somewhat, but those numbers of students are continued to projected to decline over time. So how do we improve that? Well, I think the first step, obviously, is to enhance our economic development. We have more people, more business, more industry coming into Greene County. We have, number one, more people coming into our school system. How quickly can we make that happen before we have to make some decisions on, for instance, school consolidation? That's an issue, obviously, for the school board. That's not anything that the county commission or even the county mayor has control over. The school board obviously can decide tomorrow that they want to consolidate. How do we bring more visibility and amperage to the Center for Technology? and the need to have a focus and increased noise level for service industry type professions, as well as then go forward meeting the requirements for core courses. Could we offer core courses, for instance, at the Center for Technology? These are all questions, obviously, that the school board is going to have to look at and work on, and I'm sure they are. One of the reasons I think that the consolidated high school didn't pass was obviously the amount of funding that was required to do that. A lot of people, other folks, bring up the logistics of busing kids from sort of the nether regions of Greene County back into the city. So I understand that in a lot of cases, for instance, educators, the school system, we don't necessarily want a Band-Aid approach, but what we need, I do believe, going forward, is a plan with options that people in our communities could see that we can't continue to stand or stay where we are. We've got to have some type of change because of the loss of dollars. But what that is varies greatly. With one consolidated school, I think it was just too big of a bite at one time. And people pushed back on that because there were no options. And I think people function better, for instance, when there are options. And that's not to say that I know that they had meetings. They had a steering committee. But I don't know exactly how that was, how conducive that was to the sort of the general public understanding, for instance. I know that they were available and that they put in a great deal of time visiting these different communities with a handful of options that Mr. Richter and his team had designed. But I don't know that we did an adequate job, for instance, defining the problem, or at least advertising the problem. And now that the school has been voted down, do we make changes? Does the school board make changes? What other options do we have going forward? That's something to be looked forward to. So there's a solution. There's a solution. We know the problem. There's a solution. And we just have to work toward that solution and be positive about it.
Well, I want to thank Greene County Mayor Kevin Morrison for joining us today. This is Reid Seals for WGRV, and join us next month for another interview with the Greene County Mayor.